Hello, I'm Robin. Welcome to Bookspin. I'm recording this outside today as a bit of a change because it's a nice sunny day. And today I'd like to talk about Mark Elf, which is the third story in The Rediscovery of Man. This was originally published in Saturn magazine in May 1957. And this one's got quite a different tone to what we've seen so far. So far, we've had a bit of scientific intrigue in the first story, No, No, Not Rogov. And this was followed by futuristic military science fiction in War Number 81Q. And now we've got this story, which is a kind of surreal post-apocalyptic romance. It's a strange and captivating tale, for sure. So, this story is set in a far future post-apocalyptic Earth in which we follow a young woman, Carlotta, who has for many eons been lying dormant in suspended animation in a spacecraft that's orbiting the globe. And she was the daughter of a 20th century German scientist who sent her up there, out into space, towards the end of World War II as a means of escaping the Soviets, right? And now in this story, she's finally been brought back down to Earth, many hundreds of years later. And she's revived thanks to the efforts of a mysterious telepath from afar. So, quite an intriguing premise. Now she wakes up into this strange new world and she's in for a massive culture shock, of course, having grown up in Nazi Germany. And what follows, there's not a whole lot of plot that follows this really. It's mostly her interactions and her conversations with the people and the beings that she comes into contact with after waking up. And these are some pretty weird characters, right? Among the beings that she meets is a representative of the morons, who are a class of people who have inherited the Earth. And this is the first person she speaks to. She also meets a talking bear, who seems to be an early form of the underpeople. These are uplifted animals who become very important later on in this series. There's also an ancient war robot that she encounters and has a bizarre conversation with, right? This robot is called the Menschenjäger and is extremely dangerous to almost everyone except herself, because it was programmed to kill all non-Germans. And it's been walking the earth for God knows how long. And it's still trying to carry out its mission. And she also meets Laird, who is the telepath who brought her down to Earth and who is her romantic interest in this story. So it's quite a strange one, this. There isn't a lot of plot to speak of. It's not story focused, but it's a character focused story, and it builds on the future history. It develops the world building within the instrumentality universe. Certainly, it's a very interesting world that Smith has constructed, with hints of interesting things to be explored further on in the instrumentality of mankind, but you can still enjoy it as a standalone short story. It's an entertaining read. There is one thing though that can be a bit confusing about the story, specifically regarding its timeline and its place within the instrumentality of mankind future history. within the story, it explicitly states that 16,000 years have passed since Carlotta's spacecraft left Hitler's Reich. Okay? However, it's only the third story in the Rediscovery of Man chronology, which is still relatively early on in this series. Okay, and if you look at the timeline compiled by J.J. Pierce, which is in this book, he places this story around the year 4000. Let me see if I can find it. I don't know how easy it is to see in this light, but there it is. It says Mark Elf 4000, the third story in the chronology. But, of course, within the story itself, it says 16,000, which is much later on in this timeline. After these stories, or among these stories, including Nostrilia, which is the other end of this timeline. So, this did confuse me a little bit. When is this supposed to be? Is it 4,000 or is it 16,000? That is no trivial difference, right? That is confusing. But I looked this up, right? I googled it, and I noticed someone made a very interesting point in a Goodreads review. Looking at the events in a story, it makes sense for the editors of this book to compile or to put this story early on, before the events of things which happen much later on, like Nostrilia. And the point that they were making in this review is that Cordwainer Smith himself didn't seem very concerned about this internal consistency, probably because he intended everything in his future history to have a kind of mythological feel to it. And it doesn't really matter if the dates aren't always consistent between stories. And I found this kind of interesting. They speculated that this reflects something of the Chinese tradition that he was familiar with and that he grew up with, and contrasts it to Western logical expectations. So I thought this was an interesting speculation. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. It's an odd but compelling story at the end of the day, that builds on the instrumentality, future history, and it's a nice, easy read. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon.